Breaking out of El Paso, Texas, where in a rare move, the airspace is now closed for 10 days.
What we do know is the federal orders were issued overnight. Now, the FAA order says it's for what's called special security reasons.
I'm not aware of any situation like this other than the airspace in and around New York following 9/11.
Okay, this is absolutely unprecedented. The airspace around El Paso, Texas was going to be shut down for 10 days, and it was a temporary flight restriction that was put in place. And as soon as it was put in place, almost as quickly, it was lifted back off again. But there's lots of mystery swirling around exactly why this thing was put in place and why for 10 days. Let's listen to the initial report. I'll give you some of the background on it, and then I'll tell you why it was lifted and what actually is going on.
Breaking out of El Paso, Texas, where in a rare move, the airspace is now closed for 10 days. The FAA is halting all flights to and from El Paso International, citing, quote, special security reasons. It's a move that even shocked flight crews when they heard.
Okay, special security reasons. Hang on to that phrase because that's really instrumental in our understanding of what went on. I have never seen a 10-day temporary flight restriction and a complete prohibition of flying anywhere except after 9/11. So the logical first step in why they would do this is maybe there's another 9/11 type of attack being planned. That was the first place I went with this because it just doesn't make any sense to shut down the entirety of the airspace. And when I say the entirety of the airspace, I mean no flying at all whatsoever. As you're going to learn here in a second, no medevac flights, no law enforcement flights, no news helicopters, not even your kid's paper airplane. Nothing. And then there was the threat, not the threat, the promise by the Department of Defense that if anybody flew in that airspace for the next 10 days, they would be at risk of being shot down. All right. So what is it that's so serious around El Paso that we're going to shoot you down if you fly through the airspace? Listen to the response of one of the pilots on the ground when he gets the news.
For El Paso is going to be shut down to air traffic for security reasons. Do you know if there's any exceptions for medevac status? That's a great question. There are no exceptions. It's a complete ground stop.
He says, so are there going to be any exceptions for medevac flights? Now, I don't know if this is a medevac pilot or not, or he's just curious about it. Medevac is medical emergencies. So you would think if there was ever an exception for a no-fly zone, it would be for medical emergencies. He comes back and he says this.
And it's a complete ground stop. Not even medevacs are allowed to fly.
Listen to the response. Wow. That would be my response too. Not even medevacs are allowed to fly. What could it be that makes it so dangerous to fly through the El Paso airspace that not even a medevac can fly? All right. So the leading contenders, at least in the news reports, were this. It was some sort of new 9/11 style attack that was being planned, and the government got wind of it, and it was only going to be contained to El Paso, and they've shut down the airport for 10 days. The second would be it was something related to the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and somehow they've got a link with El Paso and they're going to shut down the airport for 10 days. That's really a stretch because that really doesn't make any sense at all. But there were early news reports that might have been what it is. Then there's the big question mark of could it have been something else? It stopped at the Mexican border, by the way, which is a little clue to us. The restriction didn't go into Mexico. It stopped right at the border. But something's going on. Now there's Biggs Army Airfield there nearby. There's Fort Bliss. There are some missile testing areas not too far from El Paso. Could it have been one of those? Well, those are normal operations. There's not anything that they're going to do at any one of those facilities that's going to make it so you have to shut down El Paso for 10 days, because this is a big disruption to the system. And then there's also the threat that you will be shot down if you fly through that airspace. Here is what's really going on. This just broke minutes ago, and it's a news report out of CBS News reporting that they've lifted the restriction now in El Paso. So the 10 days lasted for about, I don't know, maybe 10 hours. And here's what was really behind it. Listen.
The FAA has just lifted its restriction on all flights in and out of El Paso International Airport. This comes after saying flights would be grounded for more than a week for, quote, security issues. For more on this, we're joined by CBS News senior transportation correspondent and Super Bowl correspondent Chris Van Cleve. Chris, help us understand what's going on here.
Freezing a critical border travel hub that
Sure. What we are learning now is that there had been concern about cartel drones that appeared to have breached U.S. airspace.
Okay, let me stop him right there. Cartel drones that had breached into U.S. airspace. Okay, that's not a 9/11 style attack. That's not somebody's going to hijack an airplane and fly it into a building. That's not missile testing at a local range. That's not anything military that they're testing and they don't want anybody to see it. It's none of those things. It certainly has nothing to do with the Nancy Guthrie case. This is the cartels have gotten so sophisticated now that they're either flying drones over to take pictures, to take video of where they're going to deliver drugs, or they're using those same drones to deliver the drugs in the same way that Amazon can deliver a package to your house. They could deliver drugs over the border, and so they're flying through now the El Paso airspace to do this stuff. And the U.S. government is onto it, and they want to shoot these drones down. Well, the problem is if you're shooting at stuff in the El Paso airspace, you don't want to hit a commercial airliner or Dr. So-and-so's Cessna as he's out flying around. You know, you got to put a complete prohibition on all of the airspace for 10-mile radius around El Paso Airport if you're going to conduct those sort of military-type operations. Apparently, they've been at it all night, and they've been shooting down drones. So he goes on. Let's listen to more.
Prompting a government response, and those activities were creating some concerns about how all of those aircraft would interact with commercial aircraft, prompting the FAA, out of an abundance of caution, to halt all flights under 18,000 feet. They put that 10-day restriction up. We don't know why it was 10 days, but now that this activity has been commenced, it appears that the Department of Defense and the Department of Transportation have determined there is not a risk to commercial aircraft, and they're going to allow flights to resume.
Okay, so he's tiptoeing around the topic here. He's saying once these activities have commenced, what he's talking about is shooting down drones, and so most likely they're using missiles or some form of explosive device to shoot down these drones, and they just can't mix that up with commercial traffic. They had to shut down the entirety of the airspace all around here to be able to do that operation safely. Now, at this point, they don't feel like it's going to be a 10-day operation. You know, they said it's okay to go back now and resume normal operations in and out of El Paso. That includes Biggs Army Airfield and Fort Bliss and those other surrounding areas. I wouldn't be shocked if you didn't see another temporary flight restriction somewhere on the U.S.-Mexican border. It may be, again, at El Paso, or it may be in other places. There's not that many large metropolitan areas like there are in El Paso. I think El Paso is the 23rd largest city in the United States. Pretty good-sized population there. So, again, if you're the drug guys, you're going to want to get drugs over the border. They're beginning to use now more and more high-tech, and they're using drones. So I'm not going to be shocked if I hear more and more stories about these overnight temporary flight restrictions. This one was shocking because it was a 10-day restriction. That just seemed kind of long. I have seen temporary flight restrictions on airports before for a few hours, a couple of days at the most. Generally speaking, there are exceptions to them. Medevac flights, news helicopters, law enforcement, obviously. This was a complete prohibition. Not even law enforcement helicopters could fly during this TFR, and now we know why. And the reason was we don't want them to be in harm's way and get shot down being mistaken for a drone. If you stop everybody from flying in an airspace and you identify something in the air, it's weapons away. Why? Because it's going to be a drone. And why only up to 18,000 feet? The drones basically don't fly above that altitude. So anything above 18,000, is fair game for the airlines and so forth to fly across. But below that, we're going to assume it's a drone, and it's a drone probably carrying drugs that are here to kill you and your family and your neighbors. And so, lots of applause here for this one. I think that was a good call on the part of the government officials who shut down the airspace. I hope they shut down a lot of drones, and I hope the cartels now go home and lick their wounds. Well, folks, this was a shocker this morning in the news, but now we've got the full picture of why it was shut down. If we come back with any any more updated information, maybe if they put the restriction back
This
on in
border
El Paso,
Skydrama is
we'll come back,
unfolding
we'll
while
follow up with
US-Iran
that,
tensions
and I'll give you
stay
all the
dangerously
details
high
as we
over
get them.
Tehran's
Well,
nuclear
now you
program
know.
and
I'm
expanding
Captain
missile arsenal.
Steve. Fly
President
safe.
Donald Trump has
All right,
recently
folks, well, if you
warned that
enjoyed
Iran
this
would be
video,
foolish
check out one of
not
these
to
other
accept
two
a new
videos. I
nuclear
think you'll
deal
like
with
them.
Washington, framing diplomacy as its last best option. From cartel drones at the southern border to carrier threats in the Gulf, the picture is of a United States with its security nerves on edge and multiple fronts to watch. On February 11th, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian again insisted that Iran is not